Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the WM watch WM191 Chronograph. This watch is available from WMWatch.com for €78. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in this black cardboard box, and inside it houses a hard shell travel case, which I'll show you. So, very well finished hard shell travel case. I'll show you the interior of it. The interior is fully upholstered with a black velour fabric to a good standard, and in the base there's a piece of sponge with a cut-out shape to it. So this does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. And I want to give due credit to WM Watch here, because they could have used the default option of a plastic or cardboard watch box, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point at only €78, but this hard shell travel case is good quality. So with regards to the items you get with the watch, you get two tags. On the reverse of one tag we have a barcode for the piece, and on the other one we have something I haven't seen before. It is a certificate of quality and it says QC Pass, so this indicates the WM191 Chronograph we're going to be looking at has passed quality control, and it's good to see that they have some quality control procedure in place. You also get this owner's instruction manual, which is in the form of a fold-out leaflet, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko VK64 Mecha Quartz. You also get this leaflet, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details step-by-step instructions of how to resize the pushpin bracelet links in the bracelet. Good to get this if you're unfamiliar with resizing pushpin bracelets. And lastly, you also get this pushpin bracelet resizing tool, which is made from plastic, and it does work to a satisfactory standard, so good to get that included. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, the WM191 Chronograph is clearly an homage to the Omega Speedmaster, so very similar proportions to the Speedmaster. We have a 42mm case diameter. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.8mm, a thickness of 12.6mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 17.8mm at the hidden 2-button push butterfly clasp. Now this is a disappointment, and it's a clear cost-cutting measure to use a sterile unsigned hidden butterfly clasp rather than a push pin, a 2-button push clasp. This is an Omega Speedmaster homage, and therefore it should have a 2-button clasp on it, which is signed with WM's emblem, but using this sterile hidden butterfly clasp really is a disappointment because it's a cost-cutting measure, as you can see. Now, both halves of the butterfly clasp do open to a satisfactory standard, and as you can see, it is solid milled 316L grade stainless steel and mirror polished, and it's not handed. You can close the left or the right hand portion first, it doesn't matter, it doesn't overlap. But I'd like to see WM Watch update that with a 2-button push clasp to make it more like a Speedmaster. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double-domed mineral crystal, and again, this is a cost-cutting measure. Mineral crystal is less expensive than sapphire crystal, and the negative is it's not as hard and scratch resistant, and WM Watch have clearly used mineral crystal to cut production costs, and I think it's a step too far, because other watches at a similar price point, such as the Pagani designed PD1701, which is also a Speedmaster homage, uses sapphire crystal, and it's not much more expensive than this €78 WM191. But having said that, the clear anti-reflective coating on the underside of the double dome mineral crystal does work well to reduce the glare and the highly reflective nature of the double dome's mineral crystal. Slight boxed top hat profile to it, but it doesn't add significant thickness to the piece. It still is only 12.6mm, so it is good that the crystal isn't too thick and doesn't have too much distortion when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle. And also it doesn't have a magnification effect as per a single domed crystal, because it's curved on the underside. It's a double domed crystal. With regards to the dial, it's a matte white dial, and it contrasts very well with the Panda subdials. Now, I dislike the subdials because they have concentric circles to give it a 3D effect, but the problem with the concentric circles is they're highly reflective. They have a sunburst finish to them with the concentric circles refracting the light. They're reflective. I think they should have just used concave matte black subdials on the Panda subdials, because the matte black subdials wouldn't have reflected the light as much as the concentric circles, which give it a sunburst reflection effect. The other thing I think they've made a mistake on is the 10 ATM water resistant on the dial. It would look better, it would look more balanced if it said 100 meters, because 10 ATM is a short amount of text and then it has a long amount of text, water resistant, 2 long words. I think 100 meters would suffice. They don't need to put water resistant printed on the dial. If you put 100 meters, it's a given that that's referring to the water resistance of the piece. So, aluminium bezel insert as per the Speedmaster. Now, some collectors might say this is a negative because it's not as scratch resistant as the ceramic bezel insert used on the Pagani designed PD1701, but this is a Speedmaster Homage and that does use an aluminium bezel insert, so it does look aesthetically pleasing, although it's not as hard and scratch resistant as a ceramic bezel insert used on the PD1701. 500 tachymeter scale is good. Quality of the proportions of the Arabic numerals and the dots are good, and the font is fine on tachymeter. So the legibility of the tachymeter scale is good, and I like the reflective mirror polishing to the silver Arabic numerals. It's clearly legible. It contrasts very well with the black anodized aluminium bezel. So symmetry is good to the dial because we don't have a subdial at the 6 o'clock position, and this uses the VK64 rather than the VK63, which has a subdial at 6. Date complication is good at 6. The proportions of the Arabic numerals on the date wheel are good, and the black Arabic numerals on the date wheel contrast very well with the white date wheel. So the legibility and the readability of the date complication is good. I like the red contrasting tip to the arrowhead second hand on the chronograph hand because it adds legibility and the alignment is correct at 12 o'clock. So let's test the chronograph complication. So the top pusher activates the chronograph to the VK64. Now there's something to note. With this piece you have to press the top pusher very hard, much harder than on a Pagani designed PD1701, which uses a similar movement. It uses the VK63. So with this one, the VK64, the resistance should be the same, but you have to really push the pusher hard. If you push it lightly, it's not hard enough to activate the chronograph. So you have to get used to that, and it's something I dislike. I prefer it to have a lighter action as per other pieces I've reviewed with the same movement. For example, the watch dials WD1863 has a lighter action to the pushers, and that uses a similar movement, the VK63. The architecture of the 64 and the 63 is very similar. The pusher action should be identical. Pushing the top pusher again stops the chronograph, and again you have to really push it in hard to get it to stop. Pushing the lower pusher will make the chronograph hand fly back to 12 o'clock. So the lower pusher also has the same action. It's very heavily sprung loaded. You have to really push it in hard, and it's just not pleasant to use. I have experienced lighter VK64 Mecha Quartz movements, lighter pusher action. So there is room for refinement in the quality control and the build quality, because the pushers going into the case shouldn't have that much friction. They should be very light action and crisp. Just a light press should be enough to activate the chronograph. I'm just going to test it again. So you really have to get used to pushing it in hard, but it does work and it does start and stop satisfactorily. Pushing it again hard stops it, and pushing the lower pusher hard makes it reset. Now on a positive note, the alignment is correct, so the quality control is good. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. The push-pull crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters, which is acceptable specification for a Speedmaster Homage. Coin edge finished, solid 316L grade stainless steel, nice chamfer to the tips of the teeth on the coin edge finishing, so no sharp edges to the teeth. And it's got a mirror polished domed cap to it and an embossed WM emblem, as you can see, and it's good to see that they haven't used a sterile crown, which would be a cross-cutting measure. Nice to see an embossed WM emblem, which is finished to a good standard. Proportion of the crown is good. It's slightly recessed into the right-hand flank of the case, and I like it. I think that the pushers are recessed enough, and the crown is also recessed enough as per a Speedmaster, which this is an homage to. So let's test pulling it out to the first click position. So nice positive click, and if you look closely at the date complication at 6, you can see the quickset complication works well. I like the proportions of the Arabic numerals. The single Arabic numerals are the correct size, the alignment is correct, they're not too far to the left or right. Nice positive clicks to the quickset complication. It's a characteristic of the VK64 Mecha Quartz I like, that each day of the month clicks over with a nice solid click. So that's good. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement, and we're now in the time setting position. Very light resistance, clockwise and anti-clockwise. It feels very smooth because the VK64 has 0 joules, so there's no resistance in it, and the gearing is very light. So nice and smooth, minimal backplay, clockwise and anti-clockwise. When you rotate the crown, there is some slight backplay to take up the slack, but it does respond, so it's good. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. Now, the negative of this being a VK64 with 2 Panda subdials rather than 3, as per the VK63, is that we don't have a second subdial, so you can't see the seconds ticking around the subdial because there is no 6 o'clock subdial. That's something to bear in mind. As this is a Speedmaster Homage, many collectors would prefer a Panda dial with a 3rd subdial for the seconds rather than a date complication, but this is subjective. Some collectors like the symmetry, the balance of 2 subdials at 9 and 3, and also the symmetry of the date complication at 6. It comes down to personal taste. I personally like the 3 subdials as per the Speedmaster, and I think this would look better if it had 3 Panda subdials rather than just 2. And I think they could delete the date complication and use the VK63 to give it a 3rd subdial rather than the VK64 with 2 respectively. So push-pull crown works well. Right, so let's look at the bracelet. Now the bracelet has the same look as a Speedmaster bracelet. The positive of the bracelet is beautiful luster to the brush satin finishing and beautiful mirror polishing to the centre link, so they've done a good job of finishing the top side and underside, and the mirror polishing to the flanks is also done to a good standard. No sharp edges to the top side or underside to the edges of the flanks. Doesn't pull arm hair, so that's a positive. And also there's no sharp edges to the centre links on the underside, so it doesn't scratch the wrist. It's a well finished bracelet. So those are the positives. It's well finished and it looks good. But the negatives are excessive play. It's a rattly bracelet and it's very sloppy because we've got longitudinal play, lateral play, side to side play and up and down play. Play in every single one of the push pin bracelet links, and it's significant play, as you can see. Problem is it rattles, you can hear it, it's audible, and it feels like a very sloppy bracelet on wrist. Now the other negative is the end links, as you can see. Lateral side to side play, longitudinal play, up and down play, play in every single direction. And we're looking at significant play. Just look how much that wobbles. And this is simply down to poor quality control, poor build quality and tolerances. The spring bar, which goes through the centre link in the end link, should be a nice tight fit. It should be an interference fit. So what they've simply done is drilled a hole in the end link in the bracelet, which is too large for the spring bar. And then what you have is this rattle, as you can see, because it's sloppy. The tolerances aren't fine. There isn't an interference fit. The pin going through is simply undersized, or the hole is too large for the pin, and you get this large amount of play. Now for continuity I'm just going to check the other side, and we have the same problem. We're looking at significant play. It's very sloppy. So longitudinal, lateral, side to side and up and down play. Play in every single direction. Just look at the amount of play. Very, very disappointing. Now I appreciate this is a low tier piece costing €78, so one has to expect some cost cutting measures with regards to production costs, but this is again a step too far. There is room for improvement. It is possible at this price point to get a better tolerance push pin bracelet, because it does rattle and it does make an annoying sound to it when on wrist, and of course it's very sloppy. But on a positive note, no sharp edges to it and it doesn't pull arm hair. So let's look at the hidden 2-button push butterfly clasp. Now they really need to update this to a 2-button push clasp, but the 2 triggers have a firm resistance to the spring-loaded action, so they work well. Both halves open easily. Mirror polishing is good on the top side, underside and flanks of the solid milled 316L grade stainless steel butterfly clasp. No sharp edges to it, but we've got significant play in the left hand hinge pin, as you can see. Very wobbly, lateral, side to side, up and down and longitudinal play. So my reservation is that the durability long term, how long is that going to last before the pin shears? And looking at the left hand main hinge pin, Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it. There we go. We have lateral side-to-side play in it, side-to-side play, longitudinal play, up and down play. And we'll look at the right-hand main hinge pin. I'll just get the camera to focus. So again, lateral side-to-side, longitudinal, up and down play, play in every direction. So the problem is long-term, the durability of this. How long is it going to be before the riveted ends of the pin are going to shear off, or alternatively the pin itself is going to shear due to the excess shear load put on it. And lastly, we'll check the right-hand pin, which goes into the bracelet link. As you can see, significant play. Side to side, up and down, lateral and longitudinal play in every single direction. And it's significant, as you can see, it's wobbling a lot. And this is wholly unacceptable, regardless of this being a low-tier piece costing €78. So problem with the butterfly clasp is, as you can see, it rattles because we've got 4 hinge pins and every single one of them has play in. And cumulatively, the 4 pins together make the butterfly clasp rattle, and it's loose and sloppy. Now, on a positive note, it does snap shut with a nice positive click on both halves, so it does work okay, but my concern is long-term durability. Right, so let's look at the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel case back, concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it, which refracts the light, so very aesthetically pleasing, and then they've engraved it with a design of planets and then 2 space shuttles. Now, I think they should delete this because it's childish. They should simply engrave it with the WM191 brand emblem. That would look very aesthetically pleasing, or alternatively have a sterile centre section, and that would also look very aesthetically pleasing. This kind of planets and 2 space shuttle design is childish. It really isn't a mature design, and I think it spoils the piece. It's immature. So they really need to engrave the WM emblem or make it sterile, and that would make it look better quality. The circumference is engraved with these specifications such as quartz movement and the water resistance 10 ATM and stainless steel. Negligible information. We don't need to know this on the case back. So sterile with or alternatively WM emblem, that would improve it rather than this childish design. But on a positive note, it's a flat profile. So the centre section is very flat rather than being a bubble back profile, and the benefit is this is only 12.6mm as a result. So that is a good thickness for a Speedmaster Homage, and it's a 42mm, so it does wear with wrist presence, but it doesn't sit too tall on wrist like a top heavy piece because it is only 12.6. The solid end links are a tight fit to the head of the piece. Now, the good thing about the head of the piece is there's no sharp edges to the undercut to the flanks. The tips of the lugs are deburred well. The mirror polishing to the lyre or twisted Amiga style lugs is done very well. Nice mirror polished bevel to it, and also the brush satin finishing, which is longitudinal, has a nice fine grained finish. But there is a negative to the finishing to the head of the piece. Look in between the lyre twisted lugs. You can see it's rough. It's just machined. They haven't satin finished it. Now, they are capable of doing it. If you look at the longitudinal brush satin finishing to the flanks on both the left and the right hand side, you can see it has a nice fine grained finish. But what they've done in between the lugs is it's just machined with a very rough finishing. So the stainless steel has been milled, but then they didn't chamfer it after, they didn't deburr it, and they haven't brush satin finished in between the lugs. As you can see, it's got a rough milled finish to it. And this is unacceptable even at this price point, €78, because, for example, Pagani design on the PD1701, which is a Speedmaster Homage, that is slightly more expensive, but they finish in between the lugs to a better standard. It's brush satin finish to a higher level. And this is a cost-cutting measure because in between, you can see it's just milled finish. It's machined finish. It's not brush satin finish. They don't polish it, and it just looks rough in between the lugs. And the problem is it's visible all the time, regardless of whether you wear this on a bracelet or a strap. You can't hide the rough finishing in between the lugs, permanently visible beneath the mirror polished bezel. So they need to improve the quality of the finishing in between the lugs on both the 6 and the 12 o'clock side to make it more like the fine brush satin finishing to the flanks and the mirror polishing, which is also very good. The bezel itself is well finished. Nice chamfer to it, so no sharp edge to the top edge, nice undercut, and it's mirror polished to a good standard. So the aluminium bezel insert is very well executed, the anodizing is good, and the quality of the mirror polishing to the bezel is good. So it's just a shame they didn't finish in between the lugs to the same standard. So I'll give you a wrist shot, and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and I'm pleased to report it does fit my 8-inch wrist. You could easily fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist because, as you can see, I can slide an index finger beneath the hidden butterfly clasp at all times. The negative of the butterfly clasp is there is no micro adjustment on it, and there's no half links either side of the butterfly clasp. So this means it's going to be difficult to get the correct size, because often adding or subtracting one full link from the left or the right side of a butterfly clasp bracelet is either too much or not enough. It's hard to get the correct fit. The bracelet will either be too tight or too loose. With half links either side of the butterfly clasp, that means you can get a better fit because you can use a half link to refine the fit. So no micro adjustments is the main negative of using a butterfly clasp. Butterfly clasps are okay on daily wear pieces or dress pieces, not chronograph pieces. This should have a 2-button push clasp with 6 micro adjustment holes drilled in the flanks as per a Speedmaster, and that would be better. So they really need to update this, even if it means increasing the retail price point from €78 to €88. A 2-button push clasp would be an enhancement. But having said that, the bracelet does articulate very well. The taper does look correct on a 42mm head of the piece. They've used 20 down to 17.8, which is close to the industry standard of 22 to 18, or alternatively 20 to 16. As this is a Speedmaster Homage, Speedmaster bracelets do have a straight and parallel bracelet rather than a tapering bracelet as per a Daytona. So I think it's acceptable to use a 20 to 17.8 taper. So slight taper, but it's good. The piece does feel balanced. The bracelet balances the head of the piece. Now 42mm, so it does wear with wrist presence as per an Omega Speedmaster, which is an homage to. So I would say if you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you'll find the 42mm head of the piece to have too much wrist presence. Doesn't feel top heavy because it's 138. So it feels balanced rather than top heavy. Nice curved undercut to the tips of the lugs. You can see the undercut to the flanks wraps around the wrist very well, and I like the look of the lyre lugs, the twisted lugs as per Speedmaster. They do look very aesthetically pleasing with the large mirror polished bevel, which marks the transition between the top of the lyre lugs and the flanks. So very good looking piece, but just disappointing it uses mineral crystal, and disappointing they haven't finished in between the lugs, because you can constantly see the rough finishing in between the lugs. It's not brush satin finish to the same level as the flanks. Comfortable to wear for long periods of time. The bracelet, although it is sloppy and loose, it does articulate well and it does look nice. The brush satin finishing has a nice luster, and the mirror polished centre links also have a nice finish, and I like the mirror polishing to the flanks. So it's good it doesn't have any sharp edges, and it's good it doesn't pull arm hair. Comfort is good. Case back is low profile and flat, so it does fit snug to the wrist. And at 138 grams, it doesn't feel too heavy to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So comfortable piece, well balanced, aesthetically pleasing. Right, so let's do a lume test, and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged. Now, initially, it looks okay. It doesn't look disappointing, but I can tell you, this uses C3 Superluminova, but we're not looking at 5 to 6 layers. What we're looking at is 3 to 4 layers, which is a cost-cutting measure. The colour tone match of the green C3 used on the applied indices and the baton hands is good. It's correct. It's the same green colour, so they've used the same number of layers on the applied indices and also the baton hands. The proportion of the handset is good. Length of the hands is right because the minute hand extends all the way to the minute ticks on the chaptering, and also the hour hand extends to the indices. So they've got the length of the hands correct, which is something often low-tier Chinese brands get incorrect. They make the hands too under-proportioned and too short. But this is 3 to 4 layers because it's immediately beginning to fade, and it will continue to fade fast. The exciter isn't glowing as brightly as it would do if it had 5 to 6 layers. So again, this is a cost-cutting measure too far. Now, I appreciate one has to be realistic. This is €78, and you are going to see some cost-cutting measures at €78. We're not looking at a piece costing over €100. But I think that WM Watch should consider increasing the retail price, even if it means by €10 or €15, in order to have 5 to 6 layers of 5 to 6 layers of C3. and also a sapphire crystal rather than mineral crystal, and of course a 2-button push clasp. These are the kind of enhancements that one needs to see even at this price point of €78. Pagani Design are capable of doing it at a similar price point, slightly more expensive than €78. So as you can see, Lume is performing poorly, so it's now fading, and it will continue to fade more quickly than it would do if it had 5 to 6 layers. So they just simply need to add another 1 to 2 layers, and that would improve the quality of it. But the colour tone match is good. Right, so let's discuss the movement used, which is one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So you'll all be familiar with the Seiko VK64 Mecha Quartz, which is made in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse mecha quartz movement, has 0 joules, it has hacking, which is good, and a quick set date complication, which I've demonstrated works very well. 3-year battery life is very good, so potentially you could buy this piece and wear it for 3 years without needing to change the battery. The stated accuracy of the VK64 is plus or minus 20 seconds per month, so just think about that for a moment. That's not plus or minus 20 seconds per day or per week, that is plus or minus 20 seconds per month. Better than plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy. Incredibly accurate movement. The VK63 is the correct choice for this piece, but as I've detailed, I would prefer it had a 3rd subdial at 6 o'clock, as per the Speedmaster, and I think it would look better, more balanced, with 3 subdials on the Panda dial. They should use the VK63. But if you like the date complication, which is subjective, then yes, it does look very balanced with the 2 subdials and the date complication. No negatives to the VK64 whatsoever. It's reliable, accurate, build quality is good, materials good, quality control is good. And I think it is the correct choice at this price point to use a VK64 at €78. So correct movement and very accurate at plus or minus 20 seconds per month. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So low tier piece, price point is €78. I'm going to say the price is okay. So the value is okay, but quality is poor. I can't say it's good or excellent quality because of the quality control issues, the shortcomings with the specification. Mineral crystal is a cost-cutting measure too far. It needs to be sapphire crystal. 3 to 4 layers of C3 superluminova is a cost-cutting measure too far. It needs to be 5 to 6 layers. Bracelet is sloppy with too much play. End links are too sloppy, as you can see, too much play. And we've also got play in the 4 hinge pins in the butterfly clasp. Wholly unacceptable at this price point and therefore poor quality. It needs to be a 2-button push clasp, as I've detailed, and of course not sterile. It needs to be signed with a WM emblem. So too many cost-cutting measures for my liking, and I think at this price point it represents poor quality. The value is okay at €78, but it really is poor quality at this price point. There are better alternatives. It is worth paying more for a Pagani Design PD1701, alternatively a Watch Dives WD1863, because they are higher quality pieces, stronger specification, better lume on the WD1863, and of course sapphire crystal in both the PD1701 and the WD1863, and of course 2-button push clasp. So these are the things you need to consider. I'm going to recommend it to you for consideration, but bear in mind the QC issues and the shortcomings with specification. Hope you've enjoyed my review of the WM watch WM191 Chronograph. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.